I graduated college with a degree in journalism and moved immediately to New York to pursue comedy writing. I moved in with my uncle Julius. That's him there. He was actually my great uncle. He lived in a small apartment building over a fish store on 179th Street and Broadway. It was a two-bedroom apartment that he'd lived in most of his life. In fact, he had been there so long that the shape of his body was literally molded into the furniture. He was a sweet, kind, lovely, gentle man who lived his life by a strict routine, doing the same thing every day at the same time. And he talked like this. I just had some chicken salad. Very tasty, very tasty. Ah. One day I walk into the kitchen. Uncle Julius is in there at the table eating, having chicken soup. Very tasty, very tasty. Ah. I open the refrigerator and get out some apple juice, and I'm about to pour it when Uncle Julius says, "That's my 2-week urine sample." Ah. Uncle Julius was the only person I knew in New York, and he was in his mid to late 70s, and I was 21, and there really wasn't a whole lot for us to talk about outside of chicken, and that'll only take you so far. And even though I was in this great city of New York, I was too shy and scared and intimidated to ride the subways or go out and explore. And so I was pretty lonely. Meanwhile, while I was waiting for something to happen on the comedy writing front, I sent out letters and resumes to every single newspaper and magazine within a 100-mile radius of New York City. Not a single one responded. So much for my Bachelor of Journalism degree. And that's how things went for a while, and I just got lonelier and more depressed. And that's when I thought, what I need is weed. I smoked a lot of weed back in those days, but I had no access to it in New York. So I called a friend of mine back in Texas, and he agreed to send me some. So I was very excited, couldn't wait to get the weed. And I checked the mail every day after day, and it just didn't come. Finally, after what seemed like forever, the weed arrived. Weed was very different back in those days. It was about 1/1,000,000th as potent as what you have now. And you had to get all the sticks and stems and seeds out of it. You'd put it in a colander and strain it, and it was time-consuming, pain in the ass, but I have no doubt I set the world speed record for cleaning weed that day. I was so anxious to roll that first joint. Okay, so I roll the joint, I light it up, and I start toking. And then the doorbell rings. I look through the peephole, and there are 2 policemen standing there. Now, I'm a little paranoid by nature, but add to that the marijuana-induced paranoia, and add to that the fact that I grew up in Texas, where simple possession of weed was still punishable by up to life in prison. And you can imagine how terrified I was when I saw those 2 cops out there. In my mind, I'm certain the place is filled with smoke and the odor is unmistakable. So I tell the police, just a minute, I close the peephole, I grab the weed, I run to the bathroom, and I flush every last bit of it down the toilet. Now I let the cops in, certain that I'm headed for Rikers Island. I can already imagine Uncle Julius visiting. A lot of bars. It turns out that another tenant in the building had died, and there was no phone in her apartment, and the police wanted to use ours. If they could smell the weed, they didn't care. New York cops were pretty cool. And so they left, and I had flushed that long-awaited, beloved weed needlessly down the toilet. This was what in those days we called a bummer.